What's going on, folks? Today I'm going to give you a really simple tip for training the upper pec. Now, this is a tip that you're going to be able to apply immediately and across all upper pec exercises, and it's going to involve 3 really simple steps. So here it is. The first thing that we're going to do is find your anatomy. Right, so what specifically does this mean in the context of the upper pec? Well, these blue rubber bands represent the fibers of the upper pec. And so when I say find your anatomy, what I mean is find first your collarbone, which is considered the origin of this muscle, right? Which is basically just like, you feel your collarbone here, just creep your fingers inward toward that point, and then just simply identify where directionally they run, right? So you'll find the clavicle, you basically go slightly below that point, and you'll start to poke and prod, and you'll feel some muscle there. And then what you'll feel is a kind of fiber direction if you just trace your fingers out toward the upper arm where that upper pec muscle is. So first find the interclavicle, go right below it, and then observe, okay, where do those fibers actually travel? Where am I feeling a lot of that meat? Step number 2 would then be to find the appropriate path. Now, what is an appropriate path? It simply just means that we figure out where to actually move the bones that are necessary to move to stretch and shorten the upper pecs. So put very simply, if we know that these are the upper pec fibers, in order to actually find the appropriate path for the upper pecs, what we can do is simply just put this bone in line with these fibers, because that's where the upper pecs attach, and simply just find and feel the arm path of this upper arm that traces nicely parallel with these fibers. So in the same way that if you were training your lower pecs, you would bring your arm down that way, and your middle pecs, you would bring your arm more across that way, we simply just bring the arm to the middle of the collarbone or the inner side of the collarbone, and then we trace it back outward from there whenever we're figuring out how to actually train it in any scenario. So now we've basically got a very simple steps 1 and 2 figured out. We figure out where the actual upper pec is, and then we say, okay, here is roughly my arm path that I'm going to take. And so step number 3 is basically to find that end point, end contraction point of the upper pec, and make it parallel to the load. Okay, so what does this look like? Well, let's think about how it might look on a dumbbell press. The first thing you're going to do is, again, find that path, right? So just go through the motion, lie down on a flat bench, and assess, okay, if I go through that path of motion that we just figured out based on the anatomy of the upper pec and those bony landmarks, if I take my biceps to my chin, that's kind of how I like to think about it, or if I take my biceps to my inner clavicle and I end up in this position that you all see me now here, what I can simply do is lay down on a bench and ask myself whether or not my arm will actually be in line with the load that I'm going to use. And so a very simple way to actually assess this is just lie on a flat bench, put the arm in the position that we just talked about, and then alter the angle, move it up enough so that your arm basically just falls 90 degrees from the floor. If you're just drawing a straight line down through your arm, it should cross around or roughly 90 degrees from the floor. And then from there, all you do is put the actual load in your hands and just follow that same arm path. Now from that point, can you make just minor adjustments, little tweaks in where your elbows are, or, where your hands are and how they're rotated? Yeah, absolutely. But, we want to just make sure that we're addressing each scenario from a first principle standpoint, right? And so what that means is that you can not only apply it in just the context of a dumbbell press, it means that you can go over to, let's say, something like a cable fly machine or a machine fly machine and basically just follow the same principles. The first thing you do, again, is just go through the arm path, look at where your upper arm is actually pointed, and then in the context of a machine pec fly, all you need to do is just lean slightly forward so that your arm is basically just parallel to where the actual load is moving, right? Because if you didn't lean slightly forward in this case, it would be much more likely that your arm would be coming more down and across towards something that would be a little bit more middle pec specific as opposed to upper pec specific. And so in the case of the pec fly, it might be a little bit more difficult to see, but in either case, what you're in essence doing is you're just making your arm path parallel to wherever the load is moving. So think about, let's say, like a machine chest press. You can conceptualize a machine chest press in the same exact way that we conceptualize the dumbbell chest press. We want to just set the arm path first in terms of, hey, where do I want to end up? And then tracing backward from there and adjusting our torso accordingly to the goal, again, specifically in this context being the upper pec. But again, principally, if you zoom out a little bit more, you can do this with any muscle group in the body. You identify bony landmarks, fiber direction, the path, and then you basically just set the path up perfectly parallel to the load, and you got a great exercise for any specific muscle that you want to target. So any of you still watching at this point, drop a comment below and let me know which muscle you would like to see me go through this process with next, because I'm happy to go over any muscle in this super simple way for any sort of exercise setup.